Unfortunately, we have probably all been swindled in some way by someone at some point. Maybe a former spouse lied to get out of paying child support, or a coworker took the credit for a project for which you did most of the work and got the raise or promotion that came with it. When that happens, our anger can leave us with a great deal of inner angst. The more we think about the injustice we experience, the more unsettled we feel. Bitterness can begin to invade our soul, stealing any hint of joy. We might even find ourselves feeling anxious, thinking that person has the power to sabotage some area of our lives. But when we remember the power, the authority, and the heart of our loving and faithful God, a sense of peace, it begins to kind of maybe temper our outrage and our anxiety. Years ago, when I first began pursuing a career in publishing, a relatively well-known Christian leader, he reached out to me to ask if I would ghostwrite a project for him, stating that he would pay me on the back end, meaning once he released the project. Well, assuming this individual possessed more integrity than he did, and being too green to recognize the need for a contract, I agreed. I came to regret my ignorance and naivety months later when he decided not only to vacate the project, but also to not pay me for the hours upon hours of work I had invested. Initially, I was shocked, then angered. The scenario felt so unfair, and it was, but it wasn't the end of my writing career. God used that experience to grow me as a writer and a Christ follower, and soon after began opening numerous doors that combined led me to where I am now, with 12 traditionally published and 2 self-published books, writing for numerous media outlets, and serving as a podcast host with 2 growing, globally listened to podcasts. That other guy, as far as I can tell, his publishing career went nowhere. And in fact, he's largely been forgotten. I thought of that early experience as I was listening to Genesis chapter 31 in my YouVersion Bible app. So to paraphrase, this section of scripture, it tells us about a man named Jacob who was swindled numerous times by his father-in-law. And so in this passage, in verses 38 to 42, he's actually speaking to his father-in-law, and we read, "I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for 20 years. It was like this for the 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you." Jacob arrived at his father-in-law's with nothing but the promise of God's blessing, which is infinitely more than nothing, as the years that followed reveal. Although Jacob's father-in-law tried numerous times to swindle him, God grew Jacob's wealth and his family so that he left that place a very wealthy man. And there's comfort in that. This biblical account, it reminds us that our God sees every injustice we encounter, every wound we experience, and he has the power to one day make all things right. No matter how powerful or untouchable the person swindling us might be, or at least seems to be, God is bigger. But I think it's also important to consider Jacob endured 20 years before God finally told him to take his things and his family and go. Oftentimes actually, It takes time for us to see God's plan, the good which he is bringing us to. It takes time for God to unveil that plan, but we can trust that he indeed has good plan for us. Therefore, when our circumstances feel unfair, may we remember our God remains on his throne. As Proverbs 20, verse 22 states, "Do not say, I will pay you back for this wrong. Wait for the Lord, and he will avenge you." That's his word to us today. No matter what we encounter, wait for the Lord. He will avenge you. We are not victims to our circumstances. We are not victims to other people's poor behavior. Our God is with us. He sees everything we experience, and he has promised that he has good plans for us, and he has the power to bring every one of his plans to pass.